The poem, and it is a poem whether it's translated into prose or not, the poem begins on a note of uncertainty that kind of blurs the line between history and myth and legend. In talking about the founding of the civilization, the poet offers, "What does the Persian poet say about the first man to seek the crown of world sovereignty? No one has any knowledge of those first days unless he has heard tales passed down from father to son. This is what those tales tell." Which is a curious way to start. It's admitting at the start that this doesn't necessarily have to be true. We don't know if it's true. So when you start out with that, it frames everything that follows. Always look at beginnings and endings. That framing of it could be true-ish has to stay with you throughout. So as you're reading this stuff, and even reading about increasingly historical figures, actual people, where there are legitimate histories written about them and their actions, everything needs to be taken in as a kind of, is it true? Is it fiction? Is it history? Or is it once upon a time? All of that shifts the reading into a kind of uncertain space and demands you, as readers, to step in and judge it. The first king noted is named Kayumars. He is a legendary figure of the ancient past when, quote, he lived first in the mountains where he established his throne, and he and his people dressed in leopard skins. It was he who first taught men about the preparation of food and clothing. So he's kind of a wild man in a kind of a wild, uncivilized society, but also he is a civilizing agent. He teaches them about how to cook food, how to put on clothing so that you are warm and not naked all the time. The poem also notes that all the animals in the world, wild and tame alike, reverently paid homage to him, bowing down before his throne, and their obedience increased his glory and good fortune. All nature bows before him. So the universe is recognizing his distinction, his legitimacy as king. This is the first king. It doesn't say exactly how he became that, other than the animals seem to designate it. All the universe just nods and say, he's the guy. So immediately again, if you are just your average, let's say 9th, 10th century Persian walking around, and you're told that the king, well, he is essentially a descendant of this first guy who was designated king by the universe, it's hard to oppose that. How do you challenge that? Of course he's king. Every animal in the world agreed at the start that his line was special. Think about the effect of that. Kayumars had a son named Shāhnāmeh, who was said to be super handsome and brilliant, and everybody loved him, the equal of his father in every way, but he had one single enemy, a guy named Ahriman, quote, who was secretly jealous of his splendor and looked for ways to humble him. Jealousy. Resentment. It sounds a little bit like Cain and Abel. Notice also how immediately we're told of, okay, we got Caiamars, and then underneath him, finally, we have Shāhnāmeh, but then immediately with the appearance of Shāhnāmeh, who is good, we get Ahriman, who is evil. Agents of order and chaos introduced simultaneously, always in connection. When we're told that Ahriman, quote, had a son who was like a savage wolf, we can also see that linear progression. The father was bad, so the son was bad. And so that line of evil is perpetuated. The chaos is always there. Shāhnāmeh is then killed in battle by a mysterious black demon. This loss sends the king into a Great Depression. The entire society falls into a Great Depression. The morning only ends with an angel named Sarush shows up and delivers a message from God that commands, quote, gather an army together and fight against this malevolent demon. Again, the duty of the good to oppose the evil. Which is the inherent conflict woven through Zoroastrian cosmology. In vengeance for the death of Shāhnāmeh, his son Hushang joins his grandfather Caiamars, defeats the black demon, and establishes through that line of single family rule, inherited greatness. One day, not long after that, Hushang made a significant discovery when riding through the mountains, communing with nature, let's say. He comes across something, quote, long and black suddenly appeared. Its two eyes were like bowls of blood affixed to its head, and smoke billowed from its mouth, darkening the world. Pretty clear demonic or satanic imagery here. A snake shows up in the wild. What other religious stories does that sound like? King Hushang throws a rock at it, trying to kill it. The snake just sort of dodges out of the way. The rock hits the ground, kind of stony ground, and creates a spark, flint. The spark kindles into fire, and here Hushang discovers fire. Here, obviously, you have the discovery of fire as a symbol of civilization itself. The legend of Prometheus in the Greek pantheon comes to mind. It is another example of demonic evil balanced against divine good, in this case represented by divine fire. Fire is a huge symbol within Zoroastrian cosmology. But also I would say significant is that the discovery of the fire is kind of accidental. He just threw a rock, didn't intend to do anything, but it created a spark. It's a random, almost chaotic. So that random universe that might be a sign of divine organization somehow, but is perhaps just unintelligible to us. We cannot imagine that level of divine design. But what is the place of humanity within that universe? How can we make sense of it? King Husheng then celebrates the discovery of fire with a feast, which became the annual winter festival known as Seda. And with this new power, quote, then he took ore in his fist, and with fire he created iron from its rocky home. In this way, he created the blacksmith's craft, fashioning maces, axes, saws, and hatchets. Then he turned his attention to irrigation, bringing water from lakes to the plains by means of channels and canals, and so using his royal far, which means glory, to lessen men's labor. Curious there as well. He is again the progenitor of civilization, an organizing leader who creates an economy for his people, essentially. He creates crafts. Makes me think of him to Aten, quite frankly. Getting credit for all of the activity that's going on there that makes their society so rich and powerful. But also, what is that iron ore used for? To make maces, axes, saws, and hatchets. Well, saws and hatchets you can build stuff with, but a mace and an axe, those are weapons. Weapons of war. So this is what they are celebrating. This is where they are drawing their sense of identity from. And in these first few elements of the story, the very beginning, you get the natural and universal justification of inherited dynastic rule. You get the warning against resentment of that rule. You get the duty of the good to combat evil and chaos, along with the inevitability of both to always be in conflict. You get the symbolism of fire as a kind of divine evidence. Think about the fire on Mount Sinai with the Jews. You get the establishment of cultic practices like the festival, which celebrates a victory against darkness because it's coming in winter. And once you get that, the days start getting longer. And the equating of royal authority with human civilization itself. All of this seems to buck up the legitimacy of this royal house. But all of this, again, is also cast in a kind of doubt because of that opening, which says, maybe this is how it happened. Maybe it didn't. Maybe you should take this seriously. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe this is all just a line that someone is trying to tell you so that you buy into it and you just go along the way somebody wants you to. All of this is happening in these first few lines of this very large poem. This is setting the table for understanding everything that follows. This is bracing you to make that journey and pick through the evidence and decide, well, what is BS and what is legitimate? And is this something that I should take a sense of my own identity from? all of this in the first few lines.